Welcome to another episode of TechXchange, proudly brought to you by HTX, where we bring in leading experts to share their knowledge and insights on science and technology. So what is digital transformation? It's a commonly used term, heard it a couple of times. Sounds cool as well, but what does it exactly mean?
In this episode, we speak with Dr. Ravi Gopinath. He is the Chief Strategy and Cloud Officer at AVEVA. Guys, not to confuse it with the AVEVA insurance company. With a colourful 25 years of experience in software, services and solutions for the industrial and infrastructural market, he helps companies with their digital transformation journey.
Okay. Hello, Dr. Ravi. Thank you so much for joining us today. Very happy to have you here on our second episode of TechXchange.
Thanks, Fazla. Thanks, Kokul. Delighted to be here.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So, Dr. Ravi, our listeners, or at least we are very curious to know more about your journey. So, how did you get into leading digital transformation efforts?
Yeah, so look, it goes back to educational roots. I'm a chemical engineer by training, and as luck chance would have it, I specialized in the area of modeling and simulation, where you describe things with mathematical models and you can simulate what happens. And then later on, I went and did my PhD in the area of control systems, which is, again, the application of digital technologies to chemical processes. So that created an educational foundation for me. After my studies, I came back to India and I started working there in applied research. And the focus of the applied research was really to bring digital technologies to the industry. And that involved, creating software applications using the, knowledge that one had gained through engineering, modeling, simulation, control systems. All of this was really applying all of that science and technology into helping industries perform better.
Right.
Okay.
That is a fundamental statement. Today we call that digital transformation, but at the end of the day, it's ultimately the application of technology in terms of how industries and businesses can actually perform better. So that was really my grounding. That's what started the journey. Well, and then, as one's career progressed, I continued to work in the area of software. I've been in industrial software now for close to 20 years.
Wow.
And so developing products, leading teams that develop products. And so now I'm very far away from doing any development myself.
Okay.
But the fun is really engaging with customers, understanding problems in different parts of the world, different vertical markets. And so you get a very unique perspective. And so that's been an amazing journey to sort of start from really understanding engineering and science, applying it, being able to be hands-on at the early stage of one's career, to now having the privilege to work with so many leading companies around the world, understand how they are changing their businesses and be part of their journey.
You kind of told us a bit about your role as the Chief Strategy and Cloud Officer, but could you tell us a bit more about AVEVA as a company?
AVEVA is one of the leading industrial software companies in the world. So what do we mean by industrial software? If you take any of the industries around the world, such as power generation, water purification, metal manufacturing, petrochemicals, et cetera, all of these are very, very complex industries and very important to our daily lives. We don't know it, right? So the roads we drive on, the tires our cars run on, the clothes we wear, all of these in some way depend on these industries. But these are very complex industries, very challenging processes to run. And so what AVEVA does is provide the software that allows companies operating in these different verticals to design their operating facilities, make sure that they can run their operating facilities very, very efficiently and now safely, meet environmental norms. And so we've been in this business, if you take the different parts of the company, we've been in this business for over 50 years. So that's 50 years of rich experience in delivering core technology to customers. But all of that, like I said earlier, is now coming to play because digital transformation has become so central.
Right. You kind of listed down the products and services that AVEVA provides. Why is digital transformation so important in today's climate?
Well, the reason digital transformation is so important is there's a massive amount of change, that has taken place in the world. And I'd say there are two fundamental drivers. One that has been emerging over a period of time, and that is a very increasing awareness of the importance of preserving our environment, right? And so whilst it was always an important topic, I'd say that the world at large and industry certainly has now made it a central theme. There is probably not one industrial company anywhere in the world that hasn't got sustainability in its top 3 ambitions and goals, right? So making industrial operations environmentally friendly, sustainable, and sustainability is not just in the context of cleaner operations, but making sure that things can run safely, right? These have become very, very important. So there is a very powerful reason for digital technologies to come into play. That's the first, right? The second is what has happened in the last 2 years. Because of COVID, fundamentally, the way companies operate has changed. People cannot be together at the same time. Workforces have, it's an unfortunate reality. In many instances, workforces have been reduced. So whilst companies are forced to address new business challenges, they also have to deal with an entirely new way of working. And the only thing that has been able to help in navigating this change has been digital technology and digital transformation. So it's nothing new. It has been there for a while. It's just that the events of the past few years have really given it acceleration and impetus.
Right. So you brought an interesting point about how COVID has changed things. So there's no doubt that because of the pandemic, the way we work has fundamentally changed. And it's, in fact, accelerated digital transformation. Like we even see memes online where the meme is like, who accelerated digital transformation? And the options are like CEO, CTO, and COVID. So, so we've really seen the pandemic actually accelerated adoption, especially in the areas of connected worker strategies and digital workforce solutions. So the thing is that post-pandemic, do you think that this will taper off, or at least in the more traditional industries, do you think this will continue or this will taper off?
I don't think so.
Okay.
First of all, without sounding too grim about it, I don't think there is a post-pandemic return to the way things were. The change that has now happened, I think, is there to stay. It'll probably come back to some sort of hybrid between the situation we are in now and what it used to be like pre-COVID. And I'd say that there are going to be two very important things that happen, especially if you look at the industrial sector. One is that people are now become used to, in part, and have figured out how to manage with some sort of flexible working, right? The office as it used to be is going to be completely transformed. So I think people are now figuring out how to balance work from home and work from office.
Right.
And so whilst collaboration and working together with people continues to remain important, there's a lot of day-to-day activities that you can absolutely manage digitally, right? And people, whether they were comfortable or not over the past 18 months, have been forced to get used to it and comfortable to a new way of working. So I'd say that enables things to continue, because at the end of the day, companies are about people. And when people get used to a new way of working, companies also will adapt. The second thing is, especially if you look at the industrial sector, I'd say over the past 5 to 6 years, there has started to be a generational shift in the workforce, right? So, the previous generation starts to retire, move out, and in many instances, COVID has become the trigger for people to say, okay, time to retire, hang up my boots, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
There's a new generation of workforce coming in who are digital natives. They've grown up. My generation is not, but the new generation of worker is a digital native. They're intensely comfortable with digital technologies.
Right.
And so adapting to this new way of working, I think, is here to stay.
In a business perspective, I would say that the winners of this pandemic are those that have used the impetus of the past year to accelerate their digital transformation. And from what I'm hearing, digital transformation is kind of basically used to describe the evolution of technology in its use in businesses and organizations. You could go back to, you could say it first started with the use of spreadsheets, word processors, and very basic basic rudimentary technology. And you said that it's unlikely that post-COVID businesses would gravitate back to how they used to work. So you mentioned about the skill set of the new workforce. So how can companies ensure that their people thrive in the new economy?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. When you look at, so coming back to the point you just made about digital transformation, there is a truism in driving business change that remains true even now. And in the context of software and digital technologies, even pre-COVID, pre-digital transformation, we would say that there are three things that enable success, right? It's people, process, and technology. That's what you need to to drive things. Those three factors remain as valid as before. So whether in the past it used to be called business process re-engineering, whether it would be called implementation of software or automation of processes, these are all facets that have now come together into this broader dimension of digital transformation. And I think the element of people, process, technology working together has become a lot more pronounced, right? So the reason I mentioned that in the context of what you asked is that technology has become very accessible for companies, right? So there is no dearth of technology providers. There's no dearth of means by which companies can adopt technology. It's becoming easier and easier, right? The difficult part is the processes. Processes means, how do I do work? How do companies actually operate, right? And so this is where leadership has to really look at fundamentally analyzing how should we do things differently. It's not just about let's implement software and our problems are all solved. Mm-hmm. We've got to do things fundamentally differently. And we are solving a new kind of problems. And then in doing those addressing those new problems and working in a different way, that workforce has to be reskilled to do that. So companies that are putting the right amount of focus on reskilling the workforce or enabling them with the right competencies to do new tasks. The software is an easy thing to learn, but you have to learn the fundamentals of the new task and how to work in a different way. Companies that are investing in that, and they are indeed investing a lot of effort in that, will be able to make that transition very easily.
When you say reskill the workers, could you give an example of what exactly you mean?
Yeah, so for example, let's take, I'll give the classic case of of an industrial environment, right? So let's say there's a maintenance engineer in a factory, right? So the job of the maintenance engineer is to walk around the equipment, make measurements, make sure everything is working okay, be able to alert if there is something going off kilter, sound an alarm, and so on and so forth, or execute a work task. Now, with the new technologies that are available, right, that maintenance worker can be equipped, say with a tablet, right, that he or she can walk up to a piece of equipment and not necessarily have to go and have to look at a manual to say, okay, how do I open this? Right. There will be an augmented reality projection on that iPad which shows them very, very clearly, okay, this is what you should look for. This is how you can actually do something different, right? This is how you should look for a fault. If you have a problem, you can immediately press a button and call for help, and someone can assist you online. They may be doing the same job, but now they're calling on a new set of skills. And because now their basic job becomes so much easier, you can actually teach them a little more about troubleshooting. So they become a little more of an operational expert than just a maintenance person. So you're now broadening their skill set, which means even for the individual, it gives them more of an opportunity to progress in their career, to learn and do new things.
Right.
So in the digital transformation journey, so the last thing that an organization would want is to invest huge amounts in digital transformation and then not yielding the results that they expect or seeing it fail. And sometimes this can even have like adverse repercussions like layoff or the digital transformation project. At one point in time, it could have been top priority, and then because of this, then it could get sidelined. So how can we prevent this? Is there like a framework or any strategies that organizations can follow to approach this?
Yeah, I mean, the first rule I'd say is, don't treat it like an experiment. Okay. That you got to be, like anything you do, yeah, you can try things, right? But it can't be experimenting for its own sake. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people think that software or implementing digital technology is easy. Yeah, it is easy to install a piece of software, run something. But if you don't know exactly what you're going to do with it, how it's going to impact the business, how you're going to make some measurable difference, right? Then it doesn't have a path to success. So when we, for example, at AVEVA work with our customers, in mapping them through their digital transformation journey, one of the first things we do is spend a lot of time identifying what those pain points are. Okay. And you'd be surprised that it's very difficult to adequately converge on prioritizing what those are, because you could say everything is fine, mm-hmm. or you could say, my God, there's such a laundry list of things to address. But you can easily go through and prioritize, and the prioritization is typically done based on which one will have the maximum impact. Because what you want to do is, it's like in any journey, like when you're doing something new, you want a poster child of success, right? So you want to be able to show that something worked. Because when something works, then people gravitate towards that. People say, okay, that works, so now let me try something else and maybe that'll work. So first, pick something that can show demonstrable success. Second thing, we always work with our customers and say, pick something that can scale. Because just having one point of success is like a band releasing one song that becomes a hit and 50 songs after that are failures, right? So you need to make sure that you do it once and you can repeat it, but the repetition, make sure that people can benefit at scale. So that's the two things. Pick something that can easily demonstrate success, pick something that can scale across the organization.
Do you commonly see companies approaching you and doing tech just for the sake of it?
Well, there used to be, and it's not just approaching us, I'd say that there was a point maybe 5 or 6 years ago where digital transformation, everyone knew that it was important. They didn't know how to approach it. So when you don't know and you don't see a path forward, right, a lot of people will come to you with advice. You'll start a lot of experiments. And we used to say in the industry, it's commonly known that there used to be a graveyard of pilot projects of digital transformation, because people who try various projects, fine, it's fine, it doesn't succeed, what a waste of time, like you said. Mm-hmm. But eventually, I think companies started to find a way in terms of understanding, those 2 or 3 fundamental rules that I talked about. Right. Pick a point of success, pick something that can scale. Because the third element, which is, I'd say, the most critical, is make sure people can come along with it. Because if you underestimate the change management aspect of driving digital transformation, it doesn't stick. People have to believe that, like you said, my job is not at risk. Mm-hmm. I can benefit from it, right? I have a growth path here, right? I find it enriching, rewarding. And especially for the young generation, in solving the problems of the future. I know in our company, when we work with our product development teams, it's very, very important to them, as it should be, that we are solving problems that help create a cleaner environment, right? And people relate to that, and the younger generation relates to that very, very strongly. So I think if companies learn to connect the messages of digital transformation to how individuals can succeed, how they can make an impact, then the technology is the easier part.
Right.
So usually when organizations, when they approach you, do they think about all these things and then come to you guys? Or is it a journey that you take with them to identify business problems and then what technology can be used appropriately and then how it can be implemented and things like that?
Our preference is to start early in the game, like you said, right? And there are several customers across industries that we've been fortunate to work with over many, many, many years, and so it becomes part of that strategic relationship. So it becomes like a dialogue that you have. What can we do next, and how do we become better? And companies like their partners to challenge them and bring ideas, because look, everyone I think has become pretty aware of the fact that there is more that we don't know than we know, right? So it's fine to collaborate, it's fine to ask for help. I'd say even for us as a software company, we don't believe that we have answers to every problem. So increasingly our strategy is to work with an ecosystem of partners that create a broader set of solutions that we can take for customers. Now some customers are pretty mature, they have very well-defined problems. They'll say, here are 3 things I want you to do. Can you solve this? We'll say, yes, we can solve this, and we'll deliver a very specific solution. But the more impactful ones, I'd say the more enjoyable journeys are where we can help craft the strategy in the beginning and then work along that journey.
Okay. So when it comes to the latest technologies, the big, especially the cloud infrastructure, the big tech companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and IBM, they tend to dominate the market. So, and most of them are actually based in the US. So is that something to be concerned about, especially with regards to data sovereignty or data privacy?
Yeah, I'd say that in general, my view is that it should not be a concern, right? Because look, if you're a hyperscale provider, like any of the companies you talked about, you can't afford to not keep data sovereignty, data security foremost in terms of the issues or concerns for the customers that you need to be addressing. And indeed, all of them are, right? So, and they address it through different ways. It's just through localizing data centers. I mean, so you can make sure that there is geographical localization for data centers. There's in-country presence for data centers, so that at least from a data sovereignty perspective, you're addressing those issues. But making it highly localized and specific also means that you could be, in the shorter term, right, trading off some of the access to the broader infrastructural tools and capabilities that may be on offer, right? Because everything may not be available at that last mile, right? But I'd say in general that problem is becoming less and less. So, so we, for example, our software in the cloud, right, works off of Microsoft's infrastructure. It works off of Amazon's infrastructure. We partner with IBM. So we have all of these relationships. We don't seek to build the fundamental cloud infrastructure, because we work with what these companies have to offer, right? But what we are doing is we add that very specific capability that sits on top, which means we are solving the problems of the industry, that very, very specific industrial challenge, right? Because that's our domain expertise. The hyperscale doesn't necessarily bring that domain expertise to the table, but it brings precisely that scale and the infrastructure, which makes it more and more cost effective for customers. At the end of the day, it comes down to what benefit the technology brings, but it also has to become very highly cost effective. So there's a trade-off. If you're willing to pay that premium, you can localize everything, you can have your own private cloud infrastructure, but that costs money.
Right. I think the question came from, we see them generating this massive revenue, and as a layman, I kind of think that they're kind of too big, too powerful, bigger than the government. Yeah, so I don't know.
That's an interesting question. I mean, look, I'm in the tech sector, right? So I have a slightly different perspective on that, right? It's an interesting debate, right, in terms of how big or how influential does a company get. Now, tech has become very pervasive in our lives. In some areas it's become too pervasive, right? It's from morning to night, it's part of what we do. But I think at an individual level, we always have the choice to disconnect if we want. For companies, it becomes a little more difficult, right? Because you are never operating in isolation. And that's a challenge that individuals face too. I mean, people who want to disconnect digitally,
Yeah.
you pay a price in today's
Yeah.
society by being disconnected, because
Yeah.
you just miss those channels of communication. Now, companies that want to trade off security versus accessing a lot, that's a choice they have to make. I personally believe that the companies that are creating infrastructure for the future are doing something good. They've made technology accessible at such a deep level, right, that it's transforming lives
It's ingrained in us.
in industry, in daily lives, right? So that's important. What I do believe is that there are the hyperscalers today, but nothing stops another infrastructure company from coming up. My belief that it is a free and competitive world. So Microsoft was never what it is today. Amazon was never what it is today. They started somewhere. And I hope and believe that there's always space for someone to start up and disrupt the digital technology space. Every time a disruption has happened in the field of technology, it's only created good, right?
Yes, it's created.
And it's created opportunity. It's changed lives.
Yeah.
So I'm an optimist in that sense.
Okay.
Okay.
Recently, our Minister for Foreign Affairs spoke at the UN General Assembly. He said, quote unquote, digital transformation is not about new technologies or new hardware. Fundamentally, it must be about improving lives, empowering people, especially the poorest and the most vulnerable. It is about strengthening the resilience of our societies and economies. Digital transformation should be about sustainable development. If we do not close the digital divide, we will not have achieved the Sustainable Development Goals. So my question is, would a global framework overcome the challenges faced by digital transformation? Because after all, businesses see sustainability as being at odds with profit.
So first of all, I think the statements that the minister made were absolutely spot on, right? It is the most fundamental thing that at a societal level we have to be acutely conscious of. I mean, we have been talking today so far, about the industrial environment, but at the end of the day, the industries exist, because they can deliver something that addresses a need in society. They employ people who are part of society. And so even in the industrial context, that statement, holds very, very true. To your question in terms of a global framework, I think the emergence of the global framework and sustainable development goals have given corporations and companies around the world a very tangible set of targets and goals that they can address. And so it's been extremely helpful, because now with the framework, you don't have to spend a lot of time sort of figuring out what to do. The areas that have impact have been researched, thought through by multiple organizations around the world, and these have now become accepted as a global standard. Companies are starting to adopt this, and I don't think there is that inherent trade-off between achieving SDG ambitions and profit. Because I think now, if you don't do that, your relevance as a business becomes much less, right? If I'm a supplier of technology or hardware or whatever it is, my customers will want to know that I, as a supplier, have targets that I'm driving to myself, right? So when companies publish net zero targets, for example, they don't just look at themselves. They look at where they're buying from, who they're supplying to, the environment and the ecosystem within which they operate. So I think we have moved well beyond a natural tension between doing the right thing and making profits or making money, because sustainability has now become very, very central, I'd say, to defining the future of companies.
So is there a societal divide between the digital haves and the have-nots?
I think if you're not careful, it could happen, right? And which is why governments around the world, and in Singapore especially, are taking so many steps to make sure that, digitally enabling and supporting the population to traverse that journey becomes important. Now, it's got to start at the grassroots level. People have to become more and more familiar with and adapt with the use of digital tools, and I'm talking about, hardware, and, things that are available on the phone. For one generation prior, a smartphone may have been a learning step.
Right.
I would say for a child that is growing up now, a smartphone is standard. So as technology progresses, what it will do is it will make the accessibility point easier and easier, right? And so once that starts to happen, then at the societal level, at the government level, there have to be initiatives that people can learn faster, right? Their day-to-day lives, have more and more digital presence, because it's not just about where you work, it's about transacting day-to-day things. And I think the past 18 months have just been very rapid learning curve for many people to just become used to digital life, as it were.
When we consider the societal impact of digital transformation, it's easy to make the generalization that automation and AI is taking away jobs. They have permeated the many economic and societal social activities in our societies, but that's only a small part of AI. There's also the concept of human-machine teaming. So how do we find the balance between machines and people? Because there's a lot of factors to consider: the openness of the decision-making process, the level of risk involved. I mean, an acute risk is pretty acceptable if the chance of occurrence is small, but in the case of homeland security, can we rely on algorithms?
Yeah, I mean, so whether you take the homeland security problem where the margin of error has to be really, really small, so your need for accuracy is super important. But in a way, if you take something, and I'll talk about the industrial context because that's where I've spent my professional life, if you take a power plant or a nuclear power plant, right, the margin of error there is equally small. You cannot afford to have a catastrophic failure, because as we have seen in the few unfortunate incidents that have happened around the world over many years, they have a profound impact, right? And so what fields like AI do is precisely like you say, they reduce the probability of failure.
Right.
They make sure that, because these things are very complex, so whether you're solving a surveillance problem in the context of homeland security, or a detection problem in the context of homeland security, or whether you're solving just equipment failure and making sure that something doesn't have catastrophic failure in a plant. These are complex problems and typically beyond the capability of human brains to just process everything, because you got so much information.
Right.
It's very, very difficult to process. So there's the balance is, in today's world, the access to data is unprecedented. You can measure almost anything you want. You can infer almost anything you want, because now you can have floods of data coming your way. But the more data that you have coming your way,
Right.
Make sense of it.
making sense of it and processing it, and not just processing it, but processing it in a timely fashion. You can't go back and come back after 6 months and say, yeah, I found the answer, but
Right.
the problem is gone, right? Or you have a much worse situation. So what feels like AI do, much as it creates a vision of machines taking over and the big bad world of machines and so on and so forth, at the end of the day, I fundamentally believe that it makes human lives easier, and it makes human tasks easier. And so when in our company, when we're working with digital technologies, we say that the digital technology is just the enabler. At the center of it is a human.
Right.
So when you do things in a very human-centric fashion, you're ultimately creating a path for new opportunities. Yeah, in the short term, maybe some jobs that were doing just the mundane things may go away. But it is equally the responsibility of companies and societies in general to see, as we make things safer, more reliable, how do we create more opportunities for people? And
Right.
technology definitely provides a path for that.
Right. Okay. So speaking about this, how do you think digital transformation can change the landscape with respect to homeland security?
Well, I'm personally not
Okay.
qualified to talk
Okay.
about that, but I'd say that there are multiple areas. There's obviously, the fairly obvious thing is that
Okay.
your ability to drive any outcome, whether it is making things more visible, whether it's making things more safe, ultimately rests on having data and making sense of it. Now, what one does with it
Okay.
is the specialization of the different branches and the different specializations, within Homeland Security, as it were.
Right.
Okay.
But from a technology standpoint, I'd say ultimately it's about making data more accessible, making sense of that data in a much easier way. Because at the end of the day, you don't necessarily need to have super technology specialists to make sense of it. It has to become easier and easier to do. I mean, everything that you and I consume on a daily basis on our phone or on our laptop, there is fairly complex software and technology behind this, but things have just become so easy. I mean,
Yeah.
you go home and order something on Deliveroo. I mean, you don't know what's happening in the
Yeah.
back end,
Yeah.
but it makes life easy.
Yeah. So along your career, have you actually, are there any interesting projects with regards to digital transformation that you've come across? It could be related to the public sector, or even if it's not, like any other projects that you've worked on or you've seen or heard about that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, there have been so very many,
Okay.
right? But if I were to, pick 2 or 3 examples, and I obviously won't name companies, right?
Yeah.
But I'd say that more than what we have done in the past, it's about the way we are seeing things change, right? So we work with a lot of companies in the food manufacturing sector, right? And so typically when you look at that segment, you think about, factories where, you produce cereal or you make coffee or something like that. And there's usual equipment on the shop floor and automation and machines and software, all of that can happen. And so we've been there and traversed a journey with our customers in that. But there is an interesting change that is happening in the food industry,
Right.
and that's really driven again on the hook of sustainability. Because one of the things around sustainability is making sure that you are sourcing, your food ingredients in a sustainable way,
Right.
right? You're moving to a regime of healthier food. So a lot of companies have started shifting from bulk manufacturing the same product for every market around the world to highly personalized production. Yeah?
Okay.
And so this is a very interesting thing, because now if you're supplying, let's say, cereal, or it could be dog food, right? You as a consumer can actually specify what you want in those ingredients. If you have a specific allergy, or if your favorite pet has a like or a dislike,
Right.
you can say that's exactly how I want my cereal or my dog food or whatever it is made.
Right.
And companies, regardless of how big they are figuring out how to use technology to make food a lot more personalized.
So are you expected to pay a premium for it, for this personalization?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's again the trade-off, right?
Right.
You pay a premium till such time as everyone else starts offering the same personalization,
Supply
right?
and demand.
So whoever is first in the personalization game, they can play it to their advantage till someone else comes along and makes it even easier to access. So once a barrier comes down, then the premium starts to go away, and that's the beauty of how the market operates. So to answer your question, Kokul, I mean, these kind of shifts is what makes the technology journey really interesting. You don't solve the same problem. Yeah, on one hand, the beauty is you can solve the same problem over and over again in a very predictable way. But then you automate that and let it carry on.
Right.
But the breadth and the spread of technology is such that you can work in the same industry and address a completely new set of problems that have a deep impact, like we talked about, whether it's a personalization of food, whether it's making safe drinking water available. So these are all sort of projects that we worked on, and you feel extremely happy and proud about the fact that you actually made an impact at that level.
Right. Okay. So, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, Dr. Ravi, we'll have to wrap it up here, but
Sure.
it's been such an insightful conversation. Before we do that, I actually have one last question.
Sure.
It's a burning question.
Oh, okay.
What are some of the upcoming technology that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, so look, I think one of the things that will certainly emerge and continue to develop is, AI and becoming a lot more pervasive, right? And I say pervasive and not invasive intentionally, right? Because I think we have just started to scratch the surface of how much AI can actually help us. And I'm looking forward to the day when things become much more automated because of AI, because I think it then allows humans just to go on and do much more and tap into human potential a lot better. So I certainly think that's going to happen. The other thing is obviously the notion of how we see the world around us digitally, right?
Virtual reality?
Virtual reality, extended reality, and I think that is traditionally the nice world of gamers, and people have enjoyed that world for a while, but it started to become more and more available in day-to-day context, right? So, and it doesn't just have to be in a factory. Like I said, you go with a tablet and you can see things in augmented reality, but even today, if I'm sort of doing something and I want to sort of look at home design or home decor, many websites allow you to sort of actually look at your home and place the carpet that you're looking at in the context of your home. That's augmented reality coming to play every day. So I think if you look at AI plus what we'd call mixed reality, sort of virtual reality, augmented reality coming to bear, I think that will fundamentally change the experience of technology, and it becomes a lot easier. And so I'm really looking forward to that day. Those are the two things that I feel will have the most significant day-to-day impact.
Right, and we're actually slowly starting to see them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let me quickly explain what this bowl segment is about. So in this bowl, we have a few pieces of paper. So what's going to happen is that you'll have to pick one, and in that, we'll have a personality. So it can be like a college-going person or a 5-year-old kid. So after that, we will ask you a question to the personality that you picked here. Okay? So we will give you an option here. Do you want me to read the question first, or do you want to pick the personality first?
Either way, it's going to be tough. So I'll pick first.
Okay? All right. Yeah, go for it. Okay. What does it say?
The cleaning lady.
Cleaning lady. Okay.
Oh my God.
Okay, so okay, let's try this. So
I have a very good cleaning lady.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. PhD in cleaning.
Yeah. Okay.
So cool.
So all right. So this is a question for you. So how do you explain cloud to the cleaning lady?
How do I explain cloud to the cleaning lady?
Does she use an iPhone?
Yeah.
Yeah, she uses an iPhone. I'm just trying to think about what the context would be, right? And why are we talking about cloud to the cleaning lady?
Maybe she could have. She's wondering, what is this cloud that I'm sending up my data to?
Yeah.
Where are my images getting saved? How am I listening to Spotify? Maybe.
Yeah. Or yeah. So the way. Okay, so I should now actually talk to the cleaning lady and explain to her what cloud is. Okay.
Yeah, I think it can just be the fun
Okay.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the way I would explain it is the the cloud is just a very, very large computer in some faraway place,
Okay.
which has got a lot of storage, and it can take information from multiple places, from the phone, and store data, and give access, to information. So it's a place where a lot of information is stored. Think of it as a very large computer, but it also makes sure that it is like a big, it's got a lot of different, very specialized compartments.
Okay.
So it's not like everything is mixed up.
Okay.
So if you want songs, it's got a special compartment for songs and a special compartment for recipes and so on and so forth. So every time you want to access something on your phone basically can talk through wireless or Wi-Fi and connect to that computer, access that information, whether it's a song, whether it's a recipe, and if you say I want to sort of send my messages to someone else, it can route your messages to someone else. I guess that's the. I'm sure she'd be still scratching her head with that explanation.
That was good, actually. Yeah, that was good. Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on to the next question. This is the last one.
Still her?
No. So you can pick another person.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Before I confuse her anymore.
Yeah.
Who's your personality?
An HR manager.
Okay.
Okay.
You would have to explain to the HR manager, are robots stealing our jobs?
So how do we address, a concern that an employee may have that robots are stealing jobs? So the way I tell the HR manager to explain this is the fact that in a company where people work, it's important for people to learn new things and not do the same things over and over again. So there are why are robots used? To do something that is so repetitive that it can be done 10 times faster than a human would do it, or to do something that is so complex that it can do it much more accurately. But does that mean that it therefore eliminates the work for 10 people or eliminates the work for 3 people? It may eliminate one particular job, but you can also look at it as creating the opportunity for that person to not have to do a low-level job, but can get trained to do a higher activity. And sometimes a robot is not a replacement, a robot is an addition. So think of it like, having a co-pilot that is working by your side. It can make your job faster, not always replace it.
Right.
So that's how I would talk about it.
Okay. Yeah, I think you did really well. Thank you. Thank you so much for being so sportive and doing the bold segment with us. And also
that was very, very tough, but
but you did well. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks.
So thank you, viewers, for joining us on the second episode of Tech Exchange. We had a great conversation with Dr. Ravi Gopinath. Stay tuned, and we'll meet you again in the next episode. Thank you.
Hello! We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Tech Exchange as much as we enjoy ourselves filming it. Remember to like, share and subscribe to our socials as well. And we'll see you at future episodes of Tech Exchange. Bye-bye!